Hi, welcome back. Today I want to talk with you about suicide. I know it's a difficult topic. Whether you know someone that has attempted or died by suicide or not, the reality is that it affects us all in more than one way. I have extracted some myths from the book When It's Darkest by Rory O'Connor. He's a leading expert on suicide research and one of my former professors from the University of Glasgow. I share this with the hope that it helps and promotes difficult conversations about suicide in a way that dispels the stigma that it currently carries in society. Let's get to it. Myth number 1. Those who talk about suicide are not at risk of suicide. The idea behind this myth is that anyone who is seriously considering ending their life will never say or confess this to anyone. There is absolutely no evidence of this. In fact, it misses the complex phenomenon of suicidal ideation, in which a single person can have suicidal thoughts to varying degrees throughout time. More importantly, there is scientific evidence showing that opening up about one's suicidal thoughts is one of several ways in which people thinking about suicide ask for help. At least 4 out of 10 people who died by suicide have talked to someone else about taking their own life. This is particularly important given that some healthcare professionals hold the false belief that talking about suicide is not a sign of alarm. If you find yourself on the receiving end of a conversation with someone thinking about ending their life, it is important that whether this is a casual conversation or a more serious one, you ask directly about their suicidal thoughts and remain open to explore where these thoughts come from. It is also important that if you don't think that you can keep someone safe, you direct them to healthcare professionals or emergency services. Myth number 2. All suicidal people are depressed or mentally ill. Well, there is some truth in that major depressive disorder, schizophrenia, bipolar disorder, substance abuse are most frequently associated with suicide. Mental illness by itself is not necessary or sufficient cause for suicide. We have to keep in mind that suicide frequently occurs in the context of social disadvantage in relation to sudden loss or stressful life events, or it can even result from an impulsive act. There are also cultural differences that might have a role in suicide. For example, some reports indicate that less than 50% of people that have died by suicide in India and China have a history of depression. Myth number 3. Suicide occurs without warning. The truth is that recognizing warning signs of suicide is really difficult. Nonetheless, we should talk openly with anyone thinking about ending their life and ask directly what they notice when their suicidal thoughts emerge. These warning signs could be specific thoughts like, I'm such a bad person, feelings like hopelessness, entrapment, despair, or even behaviors like social isolation. Unfortunately, there is no single list of warning signs that guarantees predicting that someone is going to end their life. But being able to talk with your loved ones about when they feel most vulnerable is a good start to start making a safety plan. Myth number 4. Asking about suicide plants the idea in someone's head. The scientific evidence on this is really clear, and there is no evidence at all that asking about suicide increases suicidal thinking. What is more important, it is that it opens the door to getting help in case that person is indeed thinking about ending their life. Myth number 5. Suicidal people want to die. One of the recognized features of suicidal thinking is ambivalence. It is a cognitive state in which people who are suicidal often switch back and forth between wanting to die and wanting to live. Whether this switch happens instantly or in a matter of days, it is often present and makes impossible to say that the decision to end one's life is final. In fact, some suicide survivors have talked about how they regretted the decision as soon as they followed through with their plans of ending their life. Myth number 6. When someone becomes suicidal, they will always remain suicidal. The facts are that most people who experience suicidal thoughts experience them during short term or due to a specific situation. And while these thoughts might come back at different times during their life, most people will recover and never attempt suicide. The important factor here is that we ensure that anyone at risk of suicide can access the help they need. Myth number 7. Suicide is inherited. The myth part of this is clearly obvious. Suicide is a behavior, and there is no way in which behaviors can be inherited. What it is important to keep in mind is that suicide risk is inherited. It is estimated that the heritability of suicidal risk factors is around 30 to 50%. In short, part of the vulnerability to suicide is inherited, but suicide itself is not. Myth number 8. Suicidal behavior is motivated by attention seeking. This idea is sadly severely stigmatizing and historically has affected the most to people who identify as women. In reality, self-harm could be the way a person sees as the only way to manage their emotions. There are signs of distress and shouldn't be dismissed. Instead, I think we should focus on listening compassionately about which feelings are bothering someone so much they are physically hurting themselves. Myth number 9. Suicide is caused by a single factor. We already talked about how mental health issues are not enough to lead to suicide. Suicide attempts are the result of a complex interaction between biological, psychological, clinical, social, and cultural factors. There is also a possibility that we are not aware of other factors that might be at play. The idea that suicide can be explained by a single factor is commonly seen when the media rushes to conclusions when a celebrity dies. I remember when Robin Williams died by suicide, media rushed to say that this was a result of his battle with Lewy body dementia. And I think it misses everything that goes into someone making the decision of ending their life. And this only adds to the stigma that suicide carries in society, and we should be really critical of these shallow observations. Myth number 10. Suicide can't be prevented. The information that we have so far from long-term studies show that overall suicide rates around the world are going down, but it is still not clear what strategies are helping to this. Something that also has been really difficult is figuring out how to prevent suicide at the individual level. And the reality is, until we don't have a way to identify not only who, but also when and where a person decides to end their life, we will keep struggling on figuring out how to prevent suicide beyond large-scale interventions. Myth number 11. Only people of a particular social status die by suicide. Let's be clear, suicide affects every social class and people from all backgrounds. What is vital to remember is that suicide is a big example of inequality and the severe consequences that inequality can have. In some countries like the UK, the lowest social class is affected almost 3 times more compared to the top social class. And I think this only highlights the importance of fighting for equality and better life conditions for everyone, not just for those who can afford better lives. Myth number 12. Improvement in mood means less suicide risk. I think this is a big one, and it might be hard to comprehend how a person with a positive mood might be thinking about suicide. But the reality is that improvement of a person's emotional state is actually associated with a higher risk of suicide. The reasoning behind this is that when someone is at their worst, they don't have the motivation to follow through or even make plans of suicide. In contrast, when someone has been able to formulate a suicide plan, they might see this as a way out of their problems. So it is almost like the burden has been lifted from them, and they now see a way out. They show better mood, and also they now have the motivation to follow through with their suicide plans. This only means that we should always be vigilant and willing to listen to our loved ones when we believe they are at risk of suicide. Of course, with this I don't mean to say that every improvement in mood means that someone is thinking about suicide. These changes might also be a result of new medication, therapy, or other types of treatment. Just keep in mind that unexplained and sudden improvement in mood might indicate that a person needs help right now. Myth number 13. Thinking about suicide is rare. A global study called the World Mental Health Survey showed that up to 16% of adults had experienced suicidal thoughts at some point in their lives. And I think that this is really eye-opening and key to getting rid of the stigma that surrounds suicide, because if you consider odds are that you know someone that has thought about suicide, and it really opens the door to having these conversations about ending your life. It is also eye-opening because it means that we are part of the life of people that are struggling with their lives and that might be thinking about suicide. So, what I will take from this is again that we should be always open to start conversations about suicide and ask directly if we believe that someone is at risk. Myth number 13. People that attempt suicide by less lethal means are not serious about it. I found that this myth also affects particularly people that identify as women, and it couldn't be more detached from reality. Studies have shown that every suicide attempt should be taken seriously, especially when we consider that a single suicide attempt is just a single glimpse of a person's mental state. They could attempt suicide again in the future, and really, we should never, never, never dismiss a suicide attempt. So, with these 14 myths, I just wanted to give you a glimpse of what suicide is and what it means. So, if you're interested in more, I would really, really encourage you to read more about suicide in Rory's book. And remember, don't be afraid to ask about suicide if you think someone is struggling, and reach out if you find yourself thinking about suicide. Watch this video if you want to know how sending a postcard might prevent repeated suicide attempts. Thank you, bye.